Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So I am mostly out of my finals period for this semester. I have a little bit more grading to do, but I hadn't been able to read very much because I was so busy. And so coming back to it, I wanted to go for something a little feel good, something that feels suited to the season. And that for me is Little Women. Little Women definitely feels like a holiday book to me. There are several Christmas scenes in here, but it's not all Christmas. But it does just feel, you know, wintry. So this is definitely a good time of year to be picking it up. So this edition I have of it is actually one that I read as a child. I spent a lot of time at my granny and papa's house growing up, and this copy was over at their house, and I would find a bed upstairs and sit on it and just read this book. I had another edition at home that was just the part 1 of Little Women, because I think Louisa May Alcott originally published it in 2 parts. And the first part ends like when Meg gets engaged before the 3-year time gap. So all the things that happen in the first half of the story are things that I remember a bit more than the latter half, which has some very sad things in it. So it was probably for the best. Yeah, I really loved Little Women as a kid. So coming back to it, there's always those good nostalgic feelings with it. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. This book is really, really beloved. There are, of course, some problems with Little Women that any modern adult reader will certainly pick up on. So Little Women is very much about these morals and the little lessons you get out of every chapter. And those lessons are very puritanical in nature. So we see they talk about Pilgrim's Progress in that book a lot, and sort of the movement of the book reflects that. And Pilgrim's Progress was basically just a way for Puritans to, you know, moralize and teach their children. Yeah, a lot of the morals in this book are pretty outdated and pretty indicative of that time period and the religion that Louisa May Alcott was in. So there are these moments where the morals come up and they're kind of like cringy from a modern perspective, a lot about sort of women keeping quiet and serving their husbands and keeping their emotions in check all of the time. So those values are definitely in here, but it's sort of unavoidable reading older books that the values of the authors are not going to line up with your modern values. We just notice it more in Little Women because she has these very explicit morals to every chapter. And even though some of them are questionable, a lot of the moral lessons are still good and still hold up. And you know, you just gotta take the good and run with that, because there's a lot in here that's just about kindness and being charitable and loving each other. But really, no modern readers are going to Little Women for the puritanical moralizing. That's not why people still love this book. We love it because of the characters. And that's really, with this more adult, mature reading that I had this time around, I really noticed how well done the characters are and how they're all very flawed, and they have their flaws very explicitly written into the text, but they're still so easy to love. So, of course, we love our most central character in Jo, who's smart and talented and kind of delightfully rebellious in every way. She's such a strong character, and she's definitely, as a child, being a little kid with aspirations to be a writer, Jo was the one I related to the most at that age. And still on this reading, her ending doesn't totally make sense to me with her marriage to the professor. But again, you know, thinking about the time period, marriage seems sort of inevitable for these characters. I do think Greta Gerwig is going to address that. I'm going to talk about that movie towards the end of this video because I'm pretty excited about it. So then there's Meg, is the oldest sister, who she's kind of the first to figure out marriage and having kids and going through all of that for the first time. And she's obviously a very lovely, lovable character. Amy's an interesting character for me because as a kid reading the book, I hated Amy. I thought she was such a brat. She was so irritating. I think that's mostly rooted in her burning up Joe's book, which, you know, that like so got to me as a kid. And I thought that's just like the worst possible thing someone could do. And I think the little kid in me who also grew up with a bunch of siblings was just like, oh, it's so unfair. She didn't get punished for that at all. She got forgiven so quickly. But as an adult, you obviously have a lot more perspective on seeing a bunch of like kids fight with each other. It's a very different thing. And then Amy grows into one of my favorite characters in the second part of the book because she's so smart and she's a lot like Joe, really, which I think was a big revelation for me in reading this the second time, that her and Joe have so many commonalities and that's why they clash. But Amy is a character who works within the system to make changes, while Joe is like constantly rebelling against it outright. So Amy can be charming and sort of play this womanly role that she has to in the time period she's working in, but she still wants to see things change. So I find her really interesting. And then there is Beth, who is just so wonderful and sweet and perfect in like the most believable way a character can be perfect. And like every single scene with Beth in it is a scene that makes me at least tear up a little bit. Even before the very sad stuff happens with Beth, she has so many just like sweet, heart-wrenching little moments. Like when she's invited to go to the Lawrences and play their grand piano, and she has to like build up the courage, and she keeps like almost getting there and then running away because she's so shy. I mean, Louisa May Alcott definitely wrote a character that you cannot help but love, making it all the more heartbreaking when we lose Beth. So, and then Mr. Lawrence and Laurie are great additions and they're neighbors. You know, Mr. Lawrence is an interesting character because he has some tragedies in his past, but he's ultimately very kind and tries really hard. And his relationship with Beth is one of my favorite dynamics in the book. It's so sweet. And then Laurie is funny and lively, and he's described that way a lot, but you feel it when you read this book. Every scene that Laurie's in, you have fun reading it because Laurie is there to, you know, play off of Joe and tease Amy and all of that. So that's the thing, like Little Women, I mean, it tells us that all of these characters have those traits, but you really feel it too. And I really think that's the strength of the book. It's not necessarily all about the plot and where they all end up, and it's not about all of those morals. It's about these incredibly lovable characters. And there's another character in this book which I thought was really interesting. Louisa May Alcott kind of inserts herself into it a lot. She has these kind of asides, especially when Joe is trying to get published. She'll say that the publisher said to Joe that this kind of stuff doesn't get published, and then Louisa May Alcott will say, I beg to differ, because she's kind of talking about her own genre. And that happens a lot, these little insertions, and I think it just adds this sense of intimacy to the book. You feel really close to Louisa May Alcott herself and her characters. It's almost like family members. And a lot of people feel that way about Little Women. A lot of people have that kind of nostalgic family kind of connection to this book, which is why it's a difficult one to try to adapt to film. I am very excited to see Greta Gerwig's. That was kind of a big part of the reason why I decided to read this one now, because I wanted to have a fresh reading in my head going into it. I think the casting is really good for it, and based on, you know, the buzz I've heard and the reviews I've heard, it seems like it's really obvious watching the movie that Greta Gerwig has the same connection to Little Women that I have and that a lot of other people have, and that she loves these characters and she loves Louisa May Alcott, and she wants to write the story again afresh with love. So it's going to be different. She's going to refresh the characters a bit, I'm sure, and it's not going to be exactly as it appears in this book. But when it's a director and a writer that you trust to be able to do that, I think it works out. Because I'm not so much that, you know, every single detail has to be completely true to the source material for it to be a good movie. But if they understand the heart of it, that's really all you need. Like, that's why Clueless is a really great adaptation of Emma. Not because it closely follows Emma in any way, but because it understands something deeper about Emma. So again, this is a great book for this time of year. I highly recommend it if you're looking for a holiday book to read over your break. It's very cozy. I definitely have high hopes for the new movie. Looking forward to it. Okay, that's all I have for this week. Thanks for watching.